source filter theory of speech production. Earlier, we discussed the components of speech production, and we talked about various processes which are involved in speech production. Like we talked about four things basically, and we called them the basic requirements for speech production. Those four things are respiration, when the air is pushed from the lungs, and the second was phonation, the process of laryngeal activity or the activities which are carried out by the vocal folds, that is called phonation. And the third one was articulation, like where the articulators are coming, they are closing to each other, and they are modifying the air passage which is coming from the larynx. That's the articulation. And the fourth one was the resonation or resonance. So these four are the basic requirements of speech production. And there are specific models and theories regarding the speech production. Like, for example, that's the source filter theory, and then the theory of tube model, and the third one is the perturbation theory. So these three are interconnected, and we would start from discussing the source filter theory, right? Like, how is the role of source played by in the process of phonation? That's played by the glottis. And the second is the resonance, that how is the role of filter played by the articulators. So we are concerned within acoustic phonetics with two things in order to describe the process of speech production. And those two things are phonation and resonance. Phonation, that's basically the vibration of vocal folds. What is done by the vocal folds in our larynx, that's phonation. And that is vibration in a very simple manner, right? That's the vibration. And that vibration does play an important role in order to produce speech, because that's the energy which is provided by the process of phonation, right? So the activity carried out by the vocal folds is a phonation, and the second is the resonance. Because in order to produce a speech sound, and then in order to manipulate those articulators in our vocal tract, we also need resonance, because that's an important aspect of the acoustic analysis of speech sound. Because without having that resonance in the vocal tract, we won't be able to articulate speech sound. That's an important point, okay? And remember one thing, that resonance is, in speech, resonance is dependent upon the, the size and the shape of the vocal cavity, right? The articulator which are playing in the this vocal cavity, right? So in order to let you understand the idea of the importance of size and shape, because when we are starting the one end of the that tube model, okay, we would discuss that later, but right now you should keep in mind that it's a tube, right? Started from larynx, okay, which is one end of the tube, and then to lips, okay? So that's a tube, right? Like in curve shape, okay? That's a curve shape because human articulators are there. So that's the one end of the tube, that's larynx, and the other end is lips in case of an oral sound, right? Or if it is the nasal sound, then of course the nostrils are the second end of the tube, right? So what happens is basically that the shape of tongue, that provides us something more about the understanding of this shape, because like in the while producing the front vowel, our tongue is the high vowel, high front vowel, our tongue is raising, okay, like E, right? E. Or when it is a low vowel, like A. So you can just imagine that how is this position of a tongue that is resizing the filter, okay, the tube, basically. So that's an important role which is played by the position of tongue, and that's the reshaping. So we would be more interested, and we would be working more on this while discussing other features of the speech production. These are two important concepts in the theory of a source filter, okay? Like the concept of glottis as a source, right? And then the concept of vocal tract is a filter. The source is the required energy, which is provided by the glottis for the production of speech sound. And the filter is the modification, the adjustment, which is done to that shape. And that adjustment is very important. And that's why we are producing different sounds. We are producing complex sounds, right? So that's an important point. And further on this concept of the source filter theory, because the source is where the energy is started, right? So in order to generate the energy as source, the acoustic energy when it is activated, that's the role played by your glottis, right? And then to filter it through the shaped vocal tract. Because what happens is that when the energy is passing through the vocal tract, that's the frequency selective manner. Because depending upon the role of your inside articulators, right? Like when it is an oral sound, you can imagine that how it is passing through the oral cavity. And then you can just think about the position of lips. When it's a rounded vowel, like oo, so you can imagine that this shape of the tube is, a little bit expanding. So that's an important idea within this source filter theory. And more important points are there that within source filter, the glottis, it is working independently than the filter, right? So source is differently working than the filter. They are working independently. And maybe that's an important point because the pitch is, different than those frequencies, right? So the vibration which is taking place in the vocal folds, that's different than the frequencies. So the role is different. And then there is the factor of length, right? So that, filter is reduced for some speech sounds, and then it is also expanded for other speech sounds. The one example which I just gave is the case of rounded vowels, right? So for that, it is a little bit increased. The size is increased. And then the shape, because the shape is also playing an important role, you see, because, when the oral cavity is used, that's a different case, right? But when the nasal cavity is used, then the air is passing through the nostrils, right? Using the nasal cavity. But how about those other cavities which are activated in between, right? Like, for example, the role of a pharyngeal cavity, right? And then also the sinus cavities, which are connecting nose with the head inside, right? So that would also definitely play a role and would shape the sound. So that's an important aspect of the understanding of the filter, right? So 2 points are there within source filter theory. One is the source, which is glottis, vocal folds, and then the filter, which is the vocal tract. And they both together work independently, depending upon the shape, depending upon the size, and ultimately those sounds are discussed. We'll continue discussing this source filter theory.